The man who would one day make the mob run like a big business was born in the poor Sicilian town of Lercara Friuli on November 24th, 1897, and given the name Salvatore Lucania. It was a town where most of the men, including his father, worked long days in the sulfur mine at the top of the hill. A hard life from which the family longed to escape. Hearing that across the ocean, America had streets paved with gold, they sailed to the promised land in 1907. The family found a flat in a Jewish neighborhood on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, just a few blocks from relatives in Little Italy. Only the streets were not as promised. Housing was cramped and dirty. Crime was rampant. Young Salvatore, one of 4 children, enrolled at PS 40, but he rarely showed up at school. Soon, he was dumped into the Brooklyn Truant School. By age 14, he was a dropout. His first job, delivery boy for a hat maker, earned him $7 a week. Chump change to many of the young hoods that Charlie encountered on the streets. Their racket, shaking down immigrants who sold food and clothing from pushcarts. Salvatore also saw kids his own age, gambling, fencing stolen goods, and dealing drugs. The streets were soon his classroom of crime. He was an eager and clever student.
There was always a suspicion that he used that job of delivering hats when he first started fooling around with the sale of illegal drugs, and that he would put some in the hat boxes as a good hiding place and stroll along. There'd be nothing in his pockets incriminating. When he wanted to make a delivery, just reach into the hat box, make the sale, and continue on his way.
He heard the lure of the street at a very early age, at least by the age of 14. He by then had committed to a criminal life. He was out there doing small-time crimes, smoking opium, having a sex life of sorts.
New York City police caught up with him for the first time at the age of 18. The charge? Possession of heroin. By then he was using various names, including Charles Lucky Luciano. But for the moment, his luck had run out. He got a year in prison. Luciano's hard-working parents, embarrassed by their drug-dealing son, never visited him in prison. After 6 months behind bars, Charlie was released, having used the time to further his criminal education. Besides peddling dope, he now gambled, earned much more money, carried a gun, and joined his first Italian gang, the Five Pointers. The gang was well connected. Every election day, its job was to harass voters, sometimes at gunpoint, into supporting New York's corrupt Democratic machine known as Tammany Hall. For this, the gang was well compensated.
That would enable them to engage in their other criminal activities during the year with a very understanding Tammany Hall, who appointed the police captain in each precinct, who appointed the magistrate that you would be brought before if you should be arrested. So you got protection for all of your illegal activities during the course of the year if you worked for Tammany Hall on election day.
But Tammany Hall couldn't always protect the gang. In 1923, federal narcotics agents arrested Luciano for dealing heroin. Charlie decided to save himself by ratting on some Jewish gangsters who had a trunk full of heroin in a basement on the Lower East Side. It was nothing personal against Jewish crooks. In fact, Charlie, who had grown up in a Jewish neighborhood, was unique in his early willingness to work with gangsters of any background.
And if they could get along together and make money together, that was the only standard that Luciano had. He didn't care what your nationality was or what your religion was. If I can trust you and we can make money, we'll work together.
2 of the Jewish gangsters he befriended were the good-looking, violent Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and the short, quiet, intellectual Meyer Lansky, who would become Luciano's most loyal partner in crime for the next half a century.
And they got together on the Lower East Side, sometime in their late teens, apparently, and became very close friends. A relationship that was so close that Bugsy Siegel, for example, who knew them both well, said that they were more than brothers, they were almost like lovers. Not to suggest that they had sex, but they had that kind of unspoken, intuitive bond. They could finish each other's sentences, or there would be a pause, and then the other one would say what the other was thinking. It was a very close connection, and it's a key to Luciano's rise, because he always has Lansky whispering in his ear.
Another key to the rise of Charles Luciano? Being in the right place, New York, at the right time. The 1920s, the era of prohibition and bootlegging. Charlie and his friends were lucky enough to learn the racket at the feet of a master, Arnold Rothstein, the man reputed to have fixed the 1919 World Series.
Arnold Rothstein hired Lansky, Ann Luciano, Ben Siegel, Frank Costello, a lot of other people who became famous names in organized crime later on, all went to work originally for Rothstein. He became a financial backer for some of these young men. Okay, you learn the business, now you go out on your own, and I will give you the financial backing and some political protection.
Just like Al Capone out in Chicago, Charlie Luciano would earn his first million as a bootlegger. But unlike Capone, who was happy to consolidate organized crime in one city, Luciano would have a grander and darker vision. A board of directors overseeing rackets around the country, with himself as chairman of the board. Mob warfare has been known to create new crime bosses. Through cunning and violence, ambitious gangsters mold the chaos of war into a peace which they alone control. The rise to power of Lucky Luciano was the classic example. By the late 1920s, young Luciano was entering his 30s and already a big player in the New York mob. He was one of a few Italians who had valuable connections to Jewish gangsters such as Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel. It wasn't long before one of the reigning Sicilian dons, Joe the Boss Masseria, embraced Luciano and made him his right-hand man. Lucky had the perfect qualifications for the job: power, connections, and most importantly, Sicilian ancestry.
He was of Sicilian birth, Sicilian on both sides of his family, and you needed that in those days to make anywhere in the mafia. But at the same time, he was more Americanized. He also had much wider contacts than most of the Sicilian gangsters, so he was able to use both these things to rise as a gangster.
He also used the bloody turf war that was raging between Joe the Boss Masseria and another old-time Sicilian don, Salvatore Maranzano. First, Maranzano tried to persuade Lucky to switch sides and work for him. When Luciano refused, he paid a stiff price.
He was picked up by 4 gangsters, apparently, around 50th Street in New York City. They beat him up terribly. He was bloodied and stabbed and kicked around and left for dead.
Luciano's survival was a stroke of luck, reaffirming the nickname he'd used for years. The attack by Maranzano's men left him with a droopy eyelid and a nasty scar across the chin, which did nothing to improve his already harsh features.
He was pockmarked anyway from smallpox when he was a child. So you looked at him for the first time and it was a nightmare of a face, I can tell you.
The attack left another deep and lasting impression on Luciano, that the gang war between the two aging Sicilians was pointless and bad for business. And it was his mission to resolve it on his terms. Step